Welcome to Zentro Audiobook, your go-to place for inspiring book summaries and life-changing wisdom delivered in a clear, engaging voice. Today we explore Open to Think by Dan Pontefract, a powerful book that challenges our fast-paced, action-obsessed culture. Pontefract reminds us that true success comes not from constant doing, but from thoughtful thinking, blending creativity, reflection, and wise action. At Zentro, we bring you such impactful ideas to help you grow, think deeper, and live better. Open to Think, Part 1, Introduction and Big Idea. In a world that worships speed, efficiency, and productivity, we've forgotten how to think. That's the powerful premise of Dan Pontefract's groundbreaking book, Open to Think. In this thoughtful and provocative work, Pontefract explores the modern-day thinking crisis, a deep, silent erosion of our ability to pause, reflect, imagine, and decide. He argues that in our rush to do more, be more, and achieve more, we've lost our most essential skill, the capacity to think clearly, openly, and wisely. We are trained to act quickly, to move without hesitation, to produce results now. We glorify busyness as a badge of honor, equating full calendars with fulfilled lives. But Dan Pontefract invites us to step back and ask, what is all this motion costing us? Are we really progressing, or are we just reacting blindly? Is this constant doing making us better, or breaking us apart? Pontefract doesn't just criticize the status quo, he offers a new framework. He introduces us to the idea of open thinking, a practice that embraces creativity, critical analysis, and thoughtful execution. It's a balanced mindset that dares to dream, deeply questions, and then takes meaningful action. Let's explore how he builds this case and why this book is more urgent today than ever before. The Thinking Crisis. What went wrong? As the book opens, Pontefract paints a sobering picture. We are living in a world full of noise but starved of meaning. Every day we are bombarded by messages, notifications, emails, meetings, targets, deadlines. We move from one task to the next like machines, rarely pausing to ask, why am I doing this? Or, is this the right path? And it's not just individuals, entire organizations are trapped in this hamster wheel. They make fast decisions to hit short-term goals, often at the expense of long-term vision. They discourage questioning, celebrate speed, and punish pause. Thinking becomes a liability. Creativity gets labeled as too slow. Caution is seen as weakness. This, Pontefract argues, is a crisis. We've traded thoughtfulness for urgency. We're constantly on, but we're rarely truly present. We've forgotten how to stop and think, or open thinking, a lost art. To understand what Pontefract means by open thinking, imagine a space where ideas are welcomed, not rushed. A place where people are free to explore, challenge, reflect, and test. Where creativity is not a luxury, but a necessity. Where critical thinking isn't confined to academic papers, but actively shapes everyday decisions. And where action doesn't mean rushing blindly, it means moving with intention and awareness. Open thinking is a practice, not a talent. It's something we can all cultivate. It's about developing the courage to pause before reacting. It's about embracing discomfort and uncertainty, long enough to find clarity. It's about listening not just to others, but to ourselves. Pontefract argues that our minds work best when they are open, not in a vague spiritual sense, but in a disciplined, deliberate, structured way. Open thinking isn't being indecisive. It's not sitting around waiting for perfection. It's balancing imagination with logic, reflection with action. In this model, three types of thinking must coexist. 1. Creative thinking, the ability to imagine, wonder, and dream. 2. Critical thinking, the ability to evaluate, question, and analyze. 3. Applied thinking, the ability to act, experiment, and execute. These are not steps to follow in sequence. They are modes of mind we must move through, often in loops and spirals. The magic happens in the blend. Why we stop thinking. Pontefract doesn't place the blame on any one person or company. This crisis is systemic. He offers several explanations for why we've stopped thinking. Technology overload. We live in a world of constant digital stimulation. Notifications, emails, and social media distract us from deep focus. We scroll, skim, and swipe, but we don't reflect. Corporate culture. Many organizations equate speed with efficiency. Meetings are held for optics. Deadlines are arbitrary. Innovation is demanded, but rarely nurtured. Educational models. Schools often teach compliance, not curiosity. Students are trained to find the right answer, not to ask better questions. Fear of being wrong. In a culture obsessed with perfection and performance, people are afraid to make mistakes, so they avoid thinking too deeply. Together, these forces create what Pontefract calls a thinking gap. We jump from input to output without proper processing. We react instead of respond. We produce instead of pondering. We do instead of decide. Real-world consequences. This isn't just a philosophical issue. It has real-life consequences. When we lose the ability to think openly, leaders make short-term decisions that damage long-term growth. Teams become echo chambers that fear dissent. Innovation stalls because there's no time to wonder or question. Personal lives suffer as we rush from task to task without reflecting on what truly matters. We become efficient machines, but hollow humans. The personal journey of the author. Dan Pontefract doesn't write from a distance. He has lived through this. In the book, he shares stories from his career as an executive, consultant, and speaker. He candidly reflects on moments when he himself was caught in the trap of reactive leadership, pushing for results at the expense of reflection. But he also shares stories of transformation, how he learned to slow down, to listen more deeply, to lead with more thoughtfulness. These personal insights make the book relatable and grounded. It's not just theory, it's life. Why now? The urgency of open thinking. We live in an age of extremes. Information is abundant, but wisdom is rare. Everyone has a voice, but few are truly heard. We are more connected than ever, yet more isolated in our minds. In such a time, thinking becomes an act of resistance. Choosing to pause, to reflect, to listen, this becomes a radical act. Pontefract's message is simple but profound. We must reclaim our right to think. It's not just about personal development, it's about reshaping the future. A world that thinks openly is a world that innovates, empathizes, and evolves. It's a world that doesn't settle for easy answers but dares to ask difficult questions. A world where wisdom can rise above noise. A call to action. At the heart of Open to Think is a call to action. Pontefract is not asking us to abandon doing. He is asking us to think better before we do, to integrate creative ideas, critical thought, and meaningful execution, to pause before rushing, to reflect before reacting, to think with intention. He writes, "Thinking is not a switch you flip, it is a discipline you build. And just like muscles, the more you use your thinking mind, the stronger it gets. The more you carve space for thought, the clearer your path becomes. The more you reflect, the wiser you grow." Summary of Part 1. Key lessons. We are facing a global thinking crisis driven by speed, noise, and distraction. Thinking is not just personal, it's organizational and cultural. Open thinking balances creativity, critical reasoning, and execution. We've stopped thinking deeply because of tech, fear, and pressure for results. Thinking is a learnable, actionable discipline, and our future depends on it. Part 2. The thinking crisis. What happens when a society stops thinking? This isn't a futuristic warning, it's already happening. We're living it. We've created a culture where thinking is no longer a virtue, but a liability, where speed beats depth, where results outrank reflection, and where we confuse activity with progress. In this section of the book, Dan Pontefract digs deep into the roots of the global thinking crisis, and it's far more dangerous than it appears. the culture of busyness. Busy is the new successful. But Dan Pontefract asks, busy doing what? Busy thinking? Or just busy reacting? Modern workplaces and even schools reward visible activity over quiet contemplation. If someone is constantly rushing from meeting to meeting, replying to emails at midnight, or when multitasking during a call, we assume they're productive. But this kind of frantic motion often disguises a lack of true progress. We've fallen in love with urgency, and in doing so, we become addicted to motion even when it's mindless. This busyness becomes a trap. It leaves no space for creativity. It replaces critical analysis with gut reactions. It forces decisions under pressure. It prioritizes immediate output over long-term outcomes. The cost? Shallow work, burned out employees, bad decisions, and a culture of fear. The trap of autopilot. Thinking. Pontefract explains that we become conditioned to run on autopilot. We wake up, check our phones, rush through breakfast, dive into work, answer emails, go to meetings, respond to chats, and then repeat the next day. We rarely stop to question the why behind our actions. This mechanical existence leaves little room for meaningful thought. We accept things as they are, follow orders blindly, make decisions based on outdated assumptions, avoid discomfort, uncertainty, or challenge. This is what Pontefract calls closed thinking, a mental state where creativity dies, curiosity vanishes, and conformity thrives. It leads to people who obey rather than innovate, and organizations that stagnate rather than grow. Thinking is a skill and we're losing it. Thinking is like a muscle. The less we use it, the weaker it gets. Dan Pontefract warns that our daily habits are literally rewiring our brains to avoid deep thinking. The constant flow of shallow content, tweets, reels, short videos, news snippets, trains our attention spans to be shorter and our tolerance for complexity to vanish. And this change is not temporary. It becomes embedded in the way we live and lead. When we stop thinking, we become more reactive. We become easier to manipulate. We lose emotional regulation. We make poorer decisions in work, life, and relationships. It's a slow erosion of awareness. And the worst part? Most people don't even realize it's happening. The corporate thinking crisis. Nowhere is the thinking crisis more visible than in organizations. Pontefract draws on years of consulting and corporate leadership to show how dangerous non-thinking has become at the institutional level. Here's how it looks in practice. Leaders demand innovation but refuse to give teams the time or psychological safety to explore new ideas. Managers rush decisions to hit quarterly goals without considering long-term damage. Employees are overloaded with tasks, meetings, and deadlines, leaving zero time for thinking or reflection. Meetings lack purpose, often held out of habit or optics rather than thoughtful planning. Success metrics are flawed, measuring speed and volume over depth and quality. What we get is a culture that rewards doing over deciding, compliance over creativity, and noise over insight. This isn't just inefficient, it's toxic. It leads to burnout, disengagement, missed opportunities, and ethical blindness. Thinking loops versus reaction cycles. Pontefract introduces an important concept here: the difference between reaction cycles and thinking loops. Reaction cycles: fast, unconscious, emotionally charged, driven by fear, pressure, or habits, results in regret, error, or superficial decisions. Thinking loops: slower, deliberate, emotionally aware, involves evaluating options, consulting others, and aligning with values. Results in wiser long-term decisions. Modern life pushes us into reaction cycles. Open thinking pulls us back into thinking loops, where reflection, creativity, and intention guide our actions. The fear of thinking. One reason we don't think deeply is because it's uncomfortable. Real thinking requires facing uncertainty, admitting we don't know, challenging the status quo, listening to opposing views, sitting with questions instead of answers. That's hard. It takes courage. So we avoid it. We distract ourselves with tasks, screens, noise, or overwork. We numb ourselves with entertainment, gossip, and drama. We keep moving so we don't have to feel lost. But Pontefract argues that discomfort is where true thinking begins. If we never feel uncomfortable, we're not growing, we're just circling. Schools are failing to teach thinking. The roots of the crisis go deep. Pontefract points out that even our education systems are part of the problem. Schools often teach students to memorize, not imagine. Punish mistakes instead of celebrating exploration. Value conformity over originality. Emphasize standardized testing over curiosity. Prepare kids to follow instructions, not question them. We raise children to be efficient learners, but not wise thinkers. By the time they reach adulthood, they've learned to fear risk, avoid ambiguity, and stick to safe bars answers. And so they carry these habits into the workplace, parenting, relationships, and eventually leadership roles. The result? A generation of adults who are skilled but shallow, productive but not purposeful. The hollowing of leadership. Pontefract doesn't shy away from hard truths. Many leaders today are hollow. They wear confidence like armor, but avoid deep thought. They speak in sound bites, not wisdom. They make fast decisions, but not informed ones. They ask others to innovate, but don't make space for thinking. And it's not entirely their fault they're trapped in the same culture that rewards action over reflection. But if we want to solve the thinking crisis, it must begin with leadership. Leaders must model open thinking. Admit when they don't know. Pause before reacting. Ask better questions. Listen more than they speak. Create safe environments for others to think. Only then can organizations begin to shift from a culture of compliance to one of creativity. Thinking isn't slow. It's strategic. A common myth is that thinking is a delay, that it slows down progress. But Pontefract flips that notion on its head. He argues that open thinking is not a delay, it's a strategic investment. It prevents costly mistakes. It builds better relationships. It uncovers deeper core opportunities. It aligns actions with purpose. In fact, skipping the thinking phase is what causes delays, because it leads to rework, conflict, and confusion down the line. When you make time to think, your actions become aligned, your decisions become wiser, your outcomes become more meaningful. Thinking is not the enemy of action, it's the architect of it. Why the crisis matters, now more than ever. Dan Pontefract closes this section with urgency. We're running out of time. The world is growing more complex. Problems are becoming more global, interconnected, and unpredictable. Climate change, political polarization, AI, mental health crises. These are not issues that can be solved by speed or brute force. They require thought, deep thought, collaborative thought, courageous thought. If we don't reclaim our ability to think, to slow down, to reflect, to reason, we risk creating a future of chaos, disconnection, and shallow survival. But if we do choose to think, we can build something better, a world driven by insight, ethos, wisdom, and humanity. Key lessons from Part 2. Busyness is not productivity, it's often avoidance. Most people are stuck in reaction cycles, not thinking loops. Deep thinking is a skill, and we're losing it due to tech and cultural pressure. Schools and workplaces fail to teach or support real thinking. Leaders must model and protect space for open thinking. Thinking isn't slow, it's strategic, powerful, and necessary. Part 3. The 3 types of thinking. Dan Pontefract believes the solution to our thinking crisis lies in reclaiming and rebalancing 3 essential forms of thought: creative thinking, critical thinking, and applied thinking. These 3 are not standalone skills, but interconnected modes of thought that work in harmony to fuel innovation, improve decision-making, and create purposeful action. In this section, Pontefract walks us through each type of thinking, its purpose, its breakdown in today's world, and how to reintegrate it into our personal and professional lives. 1. Creative thinking. The power to imagine. Creative thinking is the mental ability to generate new ideas, concepts, possibilities, and solutions. It is the birthplace of vision, invention, and transformation. But sadly, most of us were taught that creativity is reserved for the artistic painters, writers, musicians, when in reality, creative thinking is everyone's birthright and responsibility. Why creative thinking is fading. Today's obsession with efficiency and productivity stifles creativity. Pontefract outlines several barriers. Time pressure. Creativity needs incubation space to breathe, explore, and play. But most work cultures leave no time for imaginative thought. Fear of failure. In rigid environments, people fear making mistakes, but creativity thrives on experimentation and learning from errors. Micromanagement. Constant oversight and control drain the curiosity and courage needed to create. Performance-only mindset. When success is only measured by KPIs or grades, risk-taking and original thinking disappear. Instead of imagination, we default to replication, repeating what worked in the past rather than imagining what's possible in the future. What creative thinking looks like. Creative thinkers ask what-if questions, make unusual connections between ideas, challenge norms and assumptions, explore alternatives before settling on one path, allow their minds to wander productively. It's not about being artsy, it's about being open. Pontefract stresses that organizations that want to survive the future must reclaim creativity as a central pillar, and individuals who want to thrive must treat imagination as a discipline, not a luxury. Cultivating creative thinking. To grow creativity, Pontefract suggests journaling thoughts and ideas without judgment, setting aside unstructured time daily, no phone, no agenda, asking wild questions that break patterns, cross-pollinating knowledge from different fields, surrounding yourself with diverse perspectives. Even small changes can reignite the creative spark we buried beneath busyness. 2. Critical thinking. The power to question. While creativity opens new doors, critical thinking ensures we walk through the right ones. It's the ability to evaluate, analyze, and question information before accepting or acting on it. It is the mental filter that separates truth from trend, clarity from confusion, logic from illusion. The crisis of critical thinking. Pontefract highlights how critical thinking is vanishing. Social media echo chambers. Algorithms feed us what we want to hear, not what we need to challenge. Confirmation bias. We instinctively accept data that confirms our beliefs and reject anything that contradicts them. Speed culture. Critical thinking takes time, but we're conditioned to scroll, skim, and react instantly. Groupthink. In teams or leadership, many are afraid to question authority or rock the boat. Poor education systems. Schools often teach memorization, not analysis. As a result, we live in a world where fake news spreads faster than facts. Shallow thinking outpaces wisdom, and decisions are made emotionally rather than rationally. In what critical thinkers do. Critical thinkers ask, is this true? Is it useful? Is it ethical? Challenge their own beliefs. Examine consequences. Seek data from diverse sources. Separate emotion from evidence. Embrace ambiguity and complexity. They don't just accept ideas, they interrogate them. Pontefract warns that without critical thinking, creativity becomes fantasy, and applied thinking becomes recklessness. Cultivating critical thinking. To grow critical thinking, practice pausing before reacting. Play devil's advocate with your own opinions. Read sources that challenge your worldview. Use logic-based frameworks like SWOT, root cause analysis, or Socratic questioning. Teach others to think critically. It strengthens your own skill. Critical thinking is our shield against manipulation in politics, business, media, and even our personal relationships. 3. Applied thinking, the power to act, creativity dreams. Critical thinking evaluates. Applied thinking executes. It is the capacity to take action based on informed thought, not knee-jerk reaction. It Story transforms ideas and insights into outcomes. It's where intention meets implementation. The problem with misapplied thinking. Pontefract explains how action without thought becomes chaos. This is where most organizations and individuals falter today. They execute ideas that haven't been challenged or improved. Move forward based on hunches, not evidence. Prioritize completion over quality. Avoid feedback after action is taken. Reward busyness over strategy. Applied thinking is not just doing, it's doing with direction. What applied thinkers do. Applied thinkers set goals with clarity and purpose. Prioritize and plan effectively. Adapt actions based on reflection. Measure impact, not just output. Learn from experience and revise accordingly. They blend the why, creative, and the what if, critical, into the how. Cultivating applied thinking. To grow. Applied thinking. Use reflection before jumping into tasks. Practice feedback loops, act, reflect, adjust. Break big ideas into experiments and prototypes. Ask, what will success look like? Before you begin. Learn from failure, not avoid it. Pontefract encourages leaders to create systems that reward thoughtful execution, not just action for action's sake. The open thinking loop. Dan Pontefract's most powerful contribution is showing how these three forms of thinking are not separate but a cycle. Creative, critical, applied. Back to creative. Let's look at an example. 1. Creative. A marketing team brainstorms a new product idea. 2. Critical. They evaluate customer needs, industry trends, ethical implications, and long-term viability. 3. Applied. They launch a small pilot version, measure feedback, and then revisit creative, brainstorming with new data. This loop is continuous and nonlinear. You may cycle through it multiple times on a single decision. Most failures in business, government, or personal life happen when one part of the loop is ignored. Imbalance in thinking, the real danger. Pontefract outlines the most common imbalances. Over-creative, always dreaming, but never executing. Over-critical, always analyzing but paralyzed by indecision. Over-applied, always acting but with no clear direction. Balance is everything. To be a thoughtful human and a thoughtful leader is to learn how to flow between these three modes, letting each one inform and enrich the others. The leadership imperative. Dan Pontefract emphasizes that leaders play a critical role in modeling and promoting open and thinking. He offers real-world stories from companies where leaders fostered creativity, encouraged honest questioning, and gave employees the freedom to test ideas. The result? Greater innovation, stronger engagement, better outcomes. Open thinking isn't just a personal habit, it's a cultural shift. Leaders must ask, are we making time for our teams to think? Do we reward thoughtful execution or just fast results? Do we allow for brainstorming and debate? Do we reflect as much as we act? Organizations thrive when leaders make open thinking a norm, not an exception. Summary of Part 3. Key lessons. Open thinking requires three essential mental modes. O. Creative thinking, imagining possibilities. O. Critical thinking, evaluating wisely. O. Applied thinking, acting with clarity. These modes must cycle continuously to achieve meaningful progress. Most failures result from imbalance, too much of one, too little of others. Creative thinking is stifled by time pressure, fear, and routine. Critical thinking is weakened by bias, speed, and tribalism. Applied thinking is misguided when disconnected from thoughtful strategy. True leadership cultivates environments where all three types of thinking thrive. Part 4. Open thinking and action. Thought without action is useless. Action without thought is dangerous. This core truth underpins Dan Pontefract's fourth major section of Open to Think, where he shifts from theory to practice, from understanding to doing. Now that we've explored the three core types of thinking, creative, critical, and applied, it's time to see how these thinking styles can work in action across real-life situations. organizations, and individual lives. This section is full of inspiring stories, real-world case studies, and practical methods showing how open thinking not only transforms minds, but also changes outcomes. Real-world case studies. When thinking works. Pontefract presents a series of organizations and leaders who embraced open thinking and reaped extraordinary results. These are not tech unicorns or fantasy success stories. They are real, relatable examples that prove how reintroducing thoughtfulness can lead to success, sustainability, and impact. Case Study 1. W. L. Gore creating space to think. W. L. Gore, the makers of Gore-Tex, has been a shining example of long-term, sustainable innovation. What's their secret? A culture that encourages employees to think. There are no traditional managers. Employees operate as associates with freedom to pursue ideas they believe in. Time is allocated for exploration, not just execution. Teams are cross-functional and decision-making is distributed. This approach promotes creative thinking. Associates propose new product ideas. Critical thinking. Ideas are challenged by peer networks. Applied thinking. Teams self-organize to execute ideas. Result? Groundbreaking materials that revolutionized industries, all powered by open thinking. Case Study 2. Bridgewater Associates Radical Transparency, one of the world's most successful hedge funds. Bridgewater, founded by Ray Dalio, uses a radical transparency model. Here, open thinking is practiced at every level. Employees are encouraged to challenge leadership. Meetings are recorded and reviewed. Feedback is constant and structured. While some outsiders find it intense, this system supports critical thinking. Everyone is required to explain their logic. Creative thinking. Even junior staff propose strategies. Applied thinking. Execution is fast because decisions are well analyzed. This system builds thinking as a culture, not a once-a-year training workshop. Case Study 3. Patagonia, Thinking with Purpose. Patagonia is a company that has aligned its thinking practices with environmental, responsibility, and long-term impact. Creative thinking is fostered through sustainability innovation. Critical thinking is evident in how the company evaluates the real cost of products to people and the planet. Applied thinking shows in how it acts on values. For example, reducing Black Friday ads to avoid unnecessary consumption. Pontefract uses Patagonia to demonstrate how open thinking isn't just good for business, it's good for the world. Personal examples. Open thinking in life. Pontefract also zooms into individuals, showing how people who practice open thinking become more thoughtful parents, partners, professionals, and citizens. The mindful parent. Imagine a parent who, instead of reacting with frustration when a child misbehaves, pauses to reflect. They ask, what's really going on here? They think creatively about different ways to respond. They think critically about whether yelling helps or harms. They apply thoughtful action, maybe through storytelling, discipline with dialogue, or simply offering space. Such parents raise emotionally intelligent children who learn to think, not just obey. The conscious employee. A frustrated employee stuck in a toxic workplace may use open thinking to dream about a different role or path. Creative thinking. Research and reflect on what's driving the problem. Critical thinking. Experiment by changing communication style, setting boundaries, or applying for new roles. Applied thinking. Instead of being stuck in victimhood, they reclaim agency through thought. The reflective partner. In relationships, open thinking becomes the difference between reactive conflict and conscious communication. Creativity. What new ways can I express love? Critique. Are my assumptions about my partner fair? Application. What can I do today to nurture this bond? These small shifts create deeper connection. Tools and tactics for thinking in action. Pontefract offers several practical methods to integrate open thinking into your daily routine and workplace culture. 1. The Think Break. Take 15 minutes each day to disconnect from noise. No phone, no task list, just pen and paper. Ask, what's going well? What's unclear? What do I need to pause and explore? Net, this moment of solitude reconnects you with your inner voice and trains your brain to reflect regularly. 2. Think weeks. Inspired by Bill Gates's practice, Pontefract recommends setting aside extended periods, a weekend, a day, even a few hours. 2. Read broadly. Explore divergent ideas. Challenge your worldview. Think deeply about long-term goals. It's not time off, it's time in. 3. Decision journals. Whenever you make a key decision, write down, what do I believe is true? What alternatives did I consider? What are the risks? What's my emotional state? Then revisit it weeks later. You'll train yourself to think critically before acting. 4. Creative challenges. Create space for play-based thinking. Design brainstorming without constraints. Play with metaphors or storytelling. Use prompts like, how would a 5-year-old solve this? Reverse assumptions. For example, what if we didn't grow next year? Creativity is a skill that grows through deliberate play. 5. Team think time rituals. For teams and organizations, begin meetings with 3 minutes of silent reflection. Reserve 20% of meeting time for questions, not decisions. Hold what-if sessions monthly. Reward not just outcomes, but quality of thought. Open thinking is a team sport, and culture is the playing field. The power of slower decisions. One of the most controversial yet powerful insights in this part of the book is this: slower decisions are often faster in the long run. When we slow down to think, we make fewer mistakes. We understand our choices better. We anticipate risks more clearly. We align our actions with long-term goals. Pontefract urges individuals and organizations alike to redefine speed, not as how fast we act, but how smartly we move. Open thinking changes lives. Pontefract concludes this section by sharing testimonials from people who embraced open thinking. An executive who reclaimed her team's creativity by canceling 30% of meetings and creating Think Fridays. A university student who built a new app by combining open thinking principles, reflection, critical collaboration, and iterative action. A retired leader who said, I wish I had thought more when I was busy doing. These are not just feel-good stories. They are evidence that open thinking is practical, transformational, and urgently needed. Inesukuner key takeaways from Part 4. Open thinking in action. Open thinking is not theoretical. It transforms how people and organizations work. Great companies like W.L. Gore, Patagonia, and Bridgewater foster environments where thinking is valued. Individuals thrive when they slow down, reflect, and act mindfully. Tools like think breaks, journals, and team rituals embed thought into daily life. Real thinking is not a delay. It's the fuel for real success. Part 5. Common thinking traps. We were born to think freely. So why do we keep thinking poorly? In this crucial section, Dan Pontefract sheds light on the hidden obstacles that sabotage our thinking. Despite our desire to be thoughtful, intentional people, we often fall into mental habits and cultural patterns that prevent clarity, creativity, and courageous action. These obstacles, or thinking traps, are rarely obvious. They're subtle, automatic, and embedded in our workplaces, schools, and even homes. But left unchecked, they destroy open soul, thinking from the inside out. In this chapter, Pontefract explores the most dangerous thinking traps we all encounter, explains how they form, and most importantly, gives us tools to escape them. Trap 1. Speed over depth. One of the biggest enemies of thinking is the pressure to move fast, to act, respond, and decide without space to understand. We've confused speed with effectiveness. Leaders rush strategies to stay ahead of the competition. Employees feel guilty for slowing down. Students cram for tests, not understanding the content. Teams celebrate the person who speaks quickly, not the one who thinks deeply. But as Pontefract reminds us, thinking takes time. Just because you can do something quickly doesn't mean you should. If speed becomes the only measure of success, depth disappears. We repeat instead was reinventing. We copy instead of creating. We move without direction. Escape strategy. Build slow thinking rituals into your schedule. Reflective journaling, walking breaks, silence before decision making. Ask yourself, is this fast or is this wise? And trap 2, performance thinking. In modern society, we're always on stage. We perform intelligence in meetings, confidence in emails, enthusiasm in presentations, expertise on social media. But this performance mindset is a trap. It makes us act like thinkers instead of actually thinking. We speak without fully forming ideas. Pretend to know instead of admitting uncertainty. Avoid challenging norms for fear of looking wrong. When our thinking is designed to impress, not to explore, we lose curiosity. Escape strategy, normalize. I don't know yet. Celebrate thoughtful silence and honest questions in teams. Redefine credibility not as knowing everything, but being willing to learn in the open. And trap 3, overthinking. This may sound ironic in a book about thinking, but yes, too much thinking can be just as dangerous as too little. Overthinkers obsess over perfect decisions, get stuck in analysis paralysis, delay action out of fear, spiral in self-doubt. In short, they think without acting and miss opportunities. Overthinking often disguises itself as caution or intelligence, but it's really a fear of failure. Escape strategy. Learn to distinguish productive thought from rumination. Set time limits. I will reflect for 30 minutes, then act. Embrace imperfection. Take action, then iterate. Open thinking requires movement, not just imagination. Trap 4, echo chambers. Whether in teams, friend groups, or social media feeds, most people surround themselves with agreement. We listen to voices that validate our worldview, confirm our biases, praise our opinions. This creates echo chambers where real thinking cannot occur. There's no tension, no friction, no challenge. We start to believe we're right simply because no one disagrees, not because we've considered opposing ideas. Escape strategy. Seek out disagreement with curiosity, not defensiveness. Surround yourself with diverse perspectives, generational, cultural, experiential. Say, what am I missing? Instead of how am I right? Diversity of thought is oxygen for open thinking. Canaan's Trap 5, action addiction. Pontefract emphasizes that many people are addicted to doing. If we're not responding to emails, updating dashboards, checking notifications, crossing off to-do lists, we feel anxious, useless, lazy. This obsession with action leaves no room for thought. The brain, constantly overwhelmed by tasks, loses the energy to reflect or innovate. Ironically, action without thought often leads to rework, burnout, mistakes, shallow success. Escape strategy. Block calendar space for non-doing. Build reflection checkpoints into every project. Create thinking KPIs, like quality of decisions, not just quantity of tasks. Trap 6, perfectionism. Another silent killer of creativity is the illusion of getting it right the first time. Perfectionism sounds noble, but it kills experimentation, risk, and play. It often prevents people from sharing ideas until they're flawless, delays progress, creates toxic internal pressure, silences teams. Pontefract notes that in a perfectionist environment, thinking becomes rigid and defensive, not open and exploratory. Escape strategy. Encourage iteration, not instant success. Celebrate early failures as signs of courage. Remind yourself, done is better than perfect, especially when followed by reflection. Open thinking thrives in safe environments that reward trying. Trap 7, expert syndrome. Ironically, those who are most educated or experienced are often most at risk of closed thinking. When we define ourselves as experts, we stop, asking basic questions, listening to newer voices, exploring unfamiliar ideas. We protect our expertise at the cost of our evolution. Pontefract shares examples of leaders who failed not because they lacked knowledge, but because they refused to keep learning. Escape strategy. Stay humble. Let curiosity outgrow your confidence. Ask beginner questions often. Reverse mentor with younger or junior team members. Open thinking demands lifelong humility. Trap 8. Cultural norms compliance. Some of the most dangerous thinking traps are structural. In many workplaces, schools, or societies, there's an invisible pressure to comply. People fear speaking up, suggesting a new path, questioning the status quo. They've been trained, sometimes punished, to obey, not explore. This creates what Pontefract calls cultural compliance, a silent enemy of innovation, creativity, and progress. Escape strategy. Build environments where disagreement is rewarded. Model open thinking from leadership down. Replace policies and procedures with principles and purpose. To create thinking cultures, we must rethink how we lead, hire, and collaborate. Trap 9. Either or thinking. This is a subtle but powerful trap, the belief that everything must be binary. It's either logic or emotion. You either succeed or fail. You must choose between efficiency or creativity. Such black and white thinking oversimplifies life and blinds us to better solutions. In truth, most wise decisions live in the gray. They involve trade-offs, combinations, and there's balance. Escape strategy. Practice both and thinking. How can we be efficient and creative? Use paradox as fuel. What opposing truths can both be right? Welcome complexity. It's where truth lives.